So what is the all-in mindset? The all-in mindset is an earnest intent for all to increase agency. Agency is another way of saying increase choice. It's an earnest intent for all impacted to be left with more choices, an expansion of choice as a result of the actions taken or the initiatives or the endeavors undergone for the purpose of improving quality of life for all. Because quality of life is based upon the quality of choices we make based upon the choices that we have available to us. So the all-in mindset is this kind of overarching desire for all to improve their quality of life. And all win originates from this exploration of win-win. And when we look at win-win juxtaposed to win-lose, win-win is oftentimes framed as, okay, look, rather than us fighting each other, let's get into some type of collaborative, cooperative business agreement so that you can win and I can win. And that's what our world is really made up of. Our world is made up of a lot of win-win. But the problem is that win-win for any two parts ends up with a lot of other parts losing. And so win-win is almost always win-win-lose. And so win-win actually isn't good enough because it can leave us with a false sense of accomplishment that we create a win-win solution if there's just a whole slew of externalities that are resulting in, this business deal worked or this governmental deal worked, but what are all the human costs and all the ecological costs of that particular decision? So win-win isn't good enough, and win-win actually can be destructive if we over-aggrandize it. And that brought about this conceptual notion of we need something called omni-win-win, where we want all that exists to be able to win as a result of any given choice being made. And from omni-win-win, which is an academic technical term, the notion of all win was born to be able to give us something to simply orient around how we live our lives, around how we run our organizations, around the missions of our organizations, and ultimately, the ultimate vision is around the politics of how we govern ourselves and how we govern society. And to have this frame of all win, it requires a fundamental premise where we move from the notion of separate self to what we refer to the notion of living earth. And separate self is a personal narrative that I'm alone, I'm separate, I'm distinct, everything is a threat, and I need to make sure that I take care of myself no matter what. And when we start to let go of that frame and allow something new to come in, then we start to see, wait a second, actually everything is interconnected. Everything is interconnected through physics, everything is interconnected through biology, everything is interconnected through sociology, and everything is interconnected through energy. And if we keep going further, we actually realize that this entire planet that we're on is so profoundly interconnected that it's as though it's a living organism. And when we go all the way to the fundamental premise of living Earth as a narrative by which we live by, then we see ourselves as cells in that body. And what makes a cell a healthy cell is that it is showing up in a way that is positively impacting the totality of the whole, right? So a cell in its nature is all in for all other cells, and to maintain that health of the total field. And a cancerous cell is one that's in it for its own internal purposes at the cost of the rest of the whole. So all-win mindset is ultimately predicated upon this living earth paradigm. and to integrate from various spiritual traditions, as well as a modern philosopher. That's one of the people that we acknowledged in the overview of this course, Forrest Landry. He uses the definition that love is that which enables choice. And I personally resonate with that definition, and I'm using that definition in this course. And if you use that definition, then you see that love, it's not just about romance, it's not just about connection, it's not just about really, really liking something. Love is actually something profounder than those things, which is that energy and that orientation that wants agency for others, that wants others to have choices, wants others to experience freedom and liberty. And and so all-win mindset is technically the most loving thing that we have, because it is the paradigm and the orientation by which we want all to experience an increase of choice. And so I'm going to call that, this is a technical expression of love in action. All-win is designed based upon the orient of net positive for all. And to the points that Josie often communicates, she mentioned this module and as a recap from the module before, that there's loss. All-win doesn't mean that everyone is perfectly delighted with everything they get at every moment. It's that we are actually integrating and balancing and transforming that which is an expansion of choice, that which might be a contraction of choice, which choices are the most impactful for our actual improvement of the quality of our life, and that all-win is a desire that everyone impacted has a net positive impact, which means that everyone is probably going to have some loss in service to that net positive experience. All-win is not compromise. Compromise is fundamentally two parties trying to minimize their loss, okay? And I'm not saying compromise is bad. I'm just saying that's not what all-win is. All-win is categorically distinct from compromise. All-win is a generative discovery process whereby through a higher level of earnestness and contemplation and rigor and dialogue, we discover emergently new possibilities that actually are net positive for all impacted. All-win is oriented around the infinite game. And the infinite game is a reference point distinct and juxtaposed from a finite game. And a finite game is defined by a game in which there's winners and losers, in which the game has a particular domain and it begins and it ends. And an infinite game is a game where you play it because it's inherently enjoyable to play. It's inherently life-affirming to play. An infinite game doesn't have winners and losers. It just has a constant expansion of choices and possibilities that can go on forever. And we are realizing that we are at the end of the line of how we can run a human civilization based upon a win-lose mindset. And we can now open up a new era of humanity, the next 1,000 years, the next however long, in order to keep exploring this next expression of human civilization and expand it and expand it and expand it. All-win is fundamentally expressed in the cooperation and the fabric of life itself. You know, as the story goes, several billion years ago, we had single-cell organisms that filled the oceans. And these single-cell organisms, they excreted this thing called oxygen. And oxygen was their waste product. And they just went along excreting oxygen, proliferating around the oceans as single-cell organisms until they hit a problem, because they filled the entire atmosphere with oxygen and they were actually toxicifying themselves and were no longer able to go on. And what happened is that environmental pressure forced an evolution, and it was an all-win evolution where cells actually came together and formed multi-cell organisms. And an organism itself is this expression of life all winning as cells come together to cooperate and do something together they could never do on their own. And that was the origin of multi-cell organisms that led to things like kelp and dolphins and rhinoceroses and you. And so you have within you the DNA of life all winning, and evidencing that we have a history, a biological history of cooperation, a biological history of all win. And now we have the opportunity to express that fully in the civilization that we create next. All win is based upon the notion that all is us, and that we're letting go of this them notion. We're letting go of this other notion. We're letting go of this notion that there's some people that we judge and we put outside of our circle of care. All win means that we draw a line of our circle of care and we put everyone in the interior of that circle. We put everything in the interior of that circle. All win is fundamentally holistic in nature. It's synergistic in nature. It's integral in nature. And it's unifying in nature. So here is just a little opening to the conversation of what is all win and the all win mindset. And these words are just words on a screen. And as you begin to bring these words into your leadership in action, then you're going to start to go through a deeper initiation into what all win looks like and feels like. And there's always a mysterious emergent element to it. So we originally named this module Making All Win Choices, but in the process of developing the content for this module, we renamed it to Approaching All Win. And it's because it's really important to land that all win is an ideal, okay? Because if we're talking about making choices that lead to improving the quality of life for all beings on earth, for all generations to come, the only thing you need to understand is the totality of reality and every possible event horizon for the future of the totality of reality. That's all you got to figure out in order to make all win choices. So that's not the point, is for us to be able to achieve that. However, with collective sense-making processes and a deeper integration with technology and artificial intelligence, we will have a better ability to actually be omni-considerate, meaning that we're actually factoring in the total benefit. But all win is an ideal. And our goal is to approach that ideal and to improve our capacities to intentionally approach that ideal. All win isn't something that's willed out of the mind of an individual. And this is really hard for me because a lot of times I think I know the best answer. I've got the best solution already, but it doesn't work that way. All win is emergent from the process of approaching all win. All win is a way of being and not just a series of steps that we take. So we have to have the empathy and have the listening and have the communication skills. We have to embody those things in order to walk the all win path. All win is both an art and a science put together. All win is a life path that we say yes to, that will take a lifelong journey of improving your all win quotient, right? So all win isn't something that you just reach out and grab and put in your pocket and say, I've got it. All win is something to be in devotion to and to organize your life plan, your life path towards. All win is an organizing principle that helps systems to orient around their values and their priorities and their vision, and help to be able to make decisions on what matters and what strategies to undertake. And ultimately, we are on an approach to approach all win. And what we want to bring forward in the remainder of this module is the approach to approaching all win. I mean, that might sound a little bit cute, but I do really like the play on words, and it's appropriate to bring that approach in twice, that there's an approach that we can take that then helps us to approach and get closer to the full embodiment of our all-win leadership. And ultimately, what I'm trying to point to is that to be approaching all-win is to be all-win. It's not about this you got to this point and you did this thing and now you're an all-win leader. It's that you are saying yes to that approach. You're saying yes to rigorously unravel the win-lose mindset within you. And you're saying yes to the systems and processes and practices and content that we're going to bring forward, and to be earnestly applying those to the never-ending journey of your all-win leadership is to be an all-win leader.